The company asked Qin Yiping to sign a waiting agreement, saying that everyone else had signed it. Later, he discovered that others were still working. It turned out that the so-called waiting was actually a ruthless siege carried out by the company and his project team, targeting him with no bottom line. As soon as his son was discharged from the hospital, Qin Yiping hurried back to the company. Taking 3 consecutive days off was rare in his 10-plus years of career, especially during such a sensitive period. "Hey, Qin, you're back?" As he reached the office door, he happened to run into Lulu, the newly appointed employee relations supervisor from the HR department. She was about 26 or 27, with a smiling face, calling everyone brother. Qin Yiping didn't think badly of her. He nodded in response. "Is your child feeling better?" Lulu asked, with a touch of concern. "He's already had a fever, but still has some cough. He'll recover slowly at home." Qin Yiping sighed. "It's not easy when you have both elderly parents and children to take care of." "That's good." Lulu still seemed very familiar. "By the way, Qin, can you sign this?" she said, walking with Qin Yiping to his desk. "Everyone else is signed, and you're the last one." At first, Qin Yiping didn't think much of it. But when he saw the document that Lulu handed him, he froze. "A waiting agreement?" he asked, puzzled. "Waiting for what position?" "Well, the company's business volume has decreased recently," Lulu patiently explained. "Some departments and positions are underutilized. Considering that there isn't much work to be done, the leadership decided to let everyone stay at home for a while. This will also help them take care of their families." "So, you mean we're on vacation?" Qin Yiping felt uneasy. "What about the salary? How will it be paid?" "Since we're not working, of course, the salary won't be paid at the original rate." Lulu reassured him. "But don't worry, Qin, according to national regulations, the waiting salary cannot be lower than the local minimum wage. And we will still pay your social insurance and housing fund as usual." "The local minimum wage? That's just over 2,000. I can't sign this." Qin Yiping immediately rejected the proposal. "I'm still working well. Why do I need a vacation? Besides, you just said the work is underutilized." "I don't think so. Every day there are client feedback issues that require remote maintenance. How could there be no work?" "It's not that there's no work," Lulu said awkwardly. "It's just that your department is responsible for maintaining old products. The old products don't need new features developed anymore, and the company can't afford to keep a whole team just for that. The waiting arrangement is also for everyone's good. When there's appropriate work content, we'll notify you to return to work." She looked around and finally made eye contact with the project leader, Zhang Fan. "Brother Fan and the other colleagues understand. We hope you can cooperate with my work too, Qin." Qin Yiping originally didn't want to cooperate. However, the others in the project team said that under the current circumstances of the company, it was most important to keep the job. Moreover, the Social Security and Housing Fund were still being paid, so taking advantage of the break to do something else might not be worse than working. Qin Yiping thought about it and felt that it made sense. He had joined this company right after graduation, and now it had been 12 years. In these 12 years, the company hadn't grown very quickly, but the work had been smooth, and the relationships with colleagues were harmonious. Qin Yiping had just continued doing his job. That was until a few months ago. First, the HR department suddenly added a new employee relations supervisor, and soon after, everyone received a notice from HR that the overtime meals and transportation reimbursements would be canceled. "Why?" someone asked. But the notice was simply an announcement, with no explanation whatsoever. Is the company's business in trouble? Once this speculation started, it quickly spread. To make matters worse, the company, which had always been lenient about attendance, suddenly became strict, firing several employees for falsifying overtime hours. "Have you guys seen the Buick business car in front of the company lately?" One day during lunch, a colleague whispered. "I heard it's been sold," another person replied. "They've already started selling cars?" Everyone exchanged puzzled looks. It seems like the company is probably going to lay people off. Now, even the brothers in the project team weren't calm anymore. Qin Yiping had originally thought it wouldn't come to that. He had been at the company for a long time and still had faith in the boss's resources and connections. But a few days later, Qin Yiping noticed that the feng shui conch shell, which had been in the company's lobby for over 10 years, was being moved out. That conch shell had cost the boss millions of yuan. It was a meter in diameter, a treasure meant to protect the company. Every time a client came to visit, the boss would show it off, adding, "I've been in business for so many years, and honestly, there are some things that you just have to believe in." But now it was gone. Qin Yiping began to panic. What if it's true? What should we do? He secretly discussed with his wife late at night. We still have over 800,000 in mortgage to pay. But even if the company lays people off, they shouldn't cut you. An old employee, right? His wife was also worried but tried to comfort him. You're so expensive to keep. If it were me, I'd rather lay off those who have only been here for less than 2 years. They're cheaper.
Yeah.
Besides, my skills are still there. Qin Yiping regained a little confidence. The problems I can solve, those new employees might not be able to handle. But no matter what, China is still a society of personal connections, his wife reminded him. The higher-ups don't always know who's performing well and who's not. When the time comes, they'll still have to rely on your project manager to speak up for you. Make sure to get along with them. Don't really think that just doing your job will be enough. That made sense. So, the next day, Qin Yiping found an excuse to ask Zhang Fan out for drinks after work. But unexpectedly, Zhang Fan was busy. Just so happened, his son wanted to eat some puff pastry, so Qin Yiping took a detour to buy some. As he passed a hot pot restaurant, he saw Zhang Fan and a colleague from the project team, Delin, sitting inside through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It seemed like others were already starting to take action. This triggered a sense of crisis in Qin Yiping. He remembered that Zhang Fan liked playing badminton, so he booked a court for the weekend, packed his gear, and finally managed to get him to come out. After the game, the two went to a place for skewers. Don't say you're worried. I'm even more uneasy, Zhang Fan said after the third round of drinks. We're brothers. I won't hide anything from you. Actually, as grassroots managers, we hear no news, and we're even more likely to be laid off than the ones writing code down below. Zhang Fan hiccuped and began counting on his fingers. I mean, yes, I'm the project manager. That's true. But our project hasn't been updated in years. We're just maintaining the old products, and to the company, we don't really hold much value. To me, it wouldn't be surprising if the whole team got laid off one day. Even if it doesn't go that far, we might be merged with another team, right? Just leave 1 or 2 people to deal with the clients, no problem, right? So, who will be the first person the company no longer needs? At this point, Zhang Fan pointed to his nose. It's me. If the team's gone, what's the point of having a project manager? Plus, I'm older and expensive. To the company, I have no cost effectiveness. Then I'm in even worse shape. Qin Yiping couldn't help but laugh bitterly after hearing that. I'm 2 years older than you. If they only keep 1 or 2 people, it definitely won't be me. So, Qin Ge, don't blame me for not helping you. I'm just a mud Buddha crossing the river. I'm struggling to save myself. Zhang Fan gulped down a large drink, wiped his mouth, and said, this wasn't exactly him trying to fool Qin Yiping. Qin Yiping recalled seeing online that many companies were indeed cutting back on management positions, so Zhang Fan might not have much leverage. But if even Zhang Fan got laid off, who would speak up for him? Was he just going to wait for the worst to happen? Qin Yiping couldn't help but feel anxious. At the same time, he soon noticed that many young employees in other departments had started jumping ship. It seemed the company's situation was probably really bad. Qin Yiping was 34. If he were 7 or 8 years younger, he might have been able to hang on, wait for severance pay. But now, honestly, he couldn't afford to wait. So he started updating his resume, browsing job websites, and applying whenever he saw an appropriate opportunity. But the results weren't great. An entire month passed, with hundreds of applications sent out, and only a handful of replies, less than 10. He only had interviews with 3 companies, and all the salary offers were much lower than what he was currently earning. Sometimes, Qin Yiping even wondered if his project experience and the certifications he had earned had lost value in the job market. So he asked an HR representative from one of the companies about it. "It's not that," the HR responded diplomatically. "But if you were under 30, your background would be very attractive to us." So was it just because he was getting old? But he still had a full 26 years before reaching retirement age. Qin Yiping felt even more anxious. Just when things seemed to be spiraling, the flu suddenly hit, and a large number of children in his son's kindergarten fell ill, including his own son. By the time they realized, even his wife had caught it. Qin Yiping had no choice but to have his son hospitalized and took time off to care for him. But in the back of his mind, he was still uneasy. Luckily, his son's health was good, and after 3 days, he was almost fully recovered. Only then did Qin Yiping rush back to the company to resume work. That's when Lulu from HR came to find him to sign the waiting agreement. There were 5 people in his project team, and the other 4 had already signed. In the end, Qin Yiping reluctantly agreed as well. Well, at least they're still paying the social insurance and housing fund. That's better than being unemployed. He comforted his wife and himself. "It won't be more than 6 months. We can hold out." His wife checked their bank account and sighed deeply. "But if it drags on, honey, we might really have to stop paying the mortgage." "It won't come to that." After working hard for over a decade, Qin Yiping couldn't accept that outcome. He was a man, and he had a responsibility to provide for his family. So, through some friends and classmates, Qin Yiping quickly found a part-time job doing code reviews and release testing for a startup company. Though it was a part-time job, it was essentially project-based with payment made per project. If he worked diligently, he could still cover the monthly mortgage payments. This gave Qin Yiping a little more peace of mind. However, the good times didn't last long. Before long, somehow, this matter got out and the company found out. Lulu called Qin Yiping, asking him to come in for a meeting. "This isn't really a part-time job, right? I didn't sign a labor contract with them," Qin Yiping explained. "Not signing a labor contract doesn't mean there's no employment relationship. If our company doesn't sign a contract with you, does that mean you're no longer our employee?" Lulu replied, no longer smiling, addressing him formally. "How can it be the same?" Qin Yiping became anxious. "Don't you know why I'm doing this? I'm a grown man, and you pay me just over $2,000 a month. After deducting social insurance and housing fund, that's barely enough for a hot pot meal. Should I not do anything else? Should my wife and kid live on air?" "That's not what I'm saying." Lulu pulled out a calculator. "If you're not working, you're not creating any value for the company. Your salary, along with the social insurance and housing fund contributions, means that every penny the company invests in you is a net expense. Therefore, the company naturally has the right to set requirements on what you can or cannot do during your suspension." Qin Yiping, do you realize that if it weren't for the fact that you're an old employee, we could terminate your contract right now without any economic compensation, just because you took on part-time work without the company's consent? Is that so? Qin Yiping didn't fully understand. But since Lulu was so firm, he had no choice but to believe her. "So, what does the company plan to do now?" Qin Yiping asked. "2 options." Lulu raised her fingers. "First, you can submit your resignation. Although the company won't pay economic compensation, at least it will look better when you're applying for your next job. After all, no HR would want to hire someone who is laid off from another company. And the second option? The second option is..." Lulu locked eyes with him for a few seconds. "You must quit your part-time job immediately. In the future, you cannot take on any part-time work related to your current job without the company's approval."
"Fine.
"But I request the company to arrange for me to return to work." After thinking for a moment, Qin Yiping added, "That's probably not possible." Lulu shrugged. "I've already told you, the maintenance work for the old products has been underutilized, and that's why the company put you on standby. You can think about whether you want to resign, but for now, you can only wait for the company to notify you." This situation essentially cut off Qin Yiping's ability to earn money through his technical skills. But if he resigned voluntarily, he would have to pay for his own social insurance and housing fund. Furthermore, part-time income was unstable, and he might not receive any projects at all. After weighing the pros and cons, Qin Yiping decided to choose the second option. But this meant that the family's livelihood would depend solely on his wife's meager salary from the community. Qin Yiping couldn't sleep at night, anxious about the future. Luckily, by chance, he learned from a neighbor who worked part-time driving for a ride-sharing service that if he used his own car, the platform would only act as an intermediary, with no formal labor relationship. The company wouldn't have any control over him. This was good news for Qin Yiping. However, less than a week after he started driving, he received a ride request from his colleague Daling from the project team. And it was during the morning rush hour. The pickup location was Daling's home, and the destination was their company. This made Qin Yiping suspect that Daling had already returned to work. He wasn't one to beat around the bush, so he directly asked him. Not at all. Just going back to the office to pick something up, Daling answered evasively, then quickly changed the subject. He kept asking about Qin Yiping's son's health and how his ride-sharing business was going, but avoided talking about the office. There was no mistaking it. After all, having worked for so many years, Qin Yiping wasn't naive. He knew that Daling wasn't going to tell him the truth, so in the afternoon, before the workday ended, he parked his car across from the company and decided to wait for them. At first, his plan was simple. If Daling had really returned to work, he would go to the company leaders and demand to be put back to work as well. After all, Daling was someone he had trained, and if he could do the job, Qin Yiping could do it even better. However, what Qin Yiping never expected was that a few minutes later, not just Daling, but Zhang Fan and 2 other colleagues from the project team appeared in his line of sight. It turned out that he was the only one who had truly been put on standby. Watching them punch in and bid each other farewell, Qin Yiping couldn't help but tremble. At that moment, he couldn't tell whether he was more heartbroken or angry. These people were not just his colleagues. They were his lunch companions, his chat buddies, his badminton partners, his drinking mates, and his card-playing buddies. He had attended weddings, baby showers, and even funerals for some of them. Last year, they even went on a road trip together during National Day, taking countless pictures with their arms around each other. For someone like Qin Yiping, whose social circle was relatively simple, they were almost his entire circle. Qin Yiping clenched the steering wheel, trying to stop himself from rushing out to confront them. Perhaps this was all arranged by the company. Didn't Zhang Fan say he was also powerless in this situation? Qin Yiping told himself. Since Lulu was the one who had him sign the standby agreement, she had to give him an explanation. You want me to explain something to you? Qin Yiping, you don't think companies nowadays are still places where you can work for a lifetime, do you? Lulu crossed her arms, her expression cold. I never said I want to work for a lifetime. Qin Yiping's chest rose and fell as he pointed toward the door, questioning her. But you were the one who said it. The standby agreement was signed by everyone, and I had no choice but to agree, he continued, his voice rising with frustration. Now, what is this? Are you targeting me? Trying to set me up? The more he spoke, the angrier he became. I, Qin Yiping, have been at this company for over 10 years. What wrong have I done that makes you all play along with this act? Who is playing along with your act? Lulu's voice suddenly rose sharply. Qin Yiping, don't talk to me like that. The standby situation is a business decision. The workload for your old products is insufficient, and you should know that very well. As for the others going back to work, she turned and grabbed the standby agreement that Qin Yiping had signed, slamming it onto the table. It clearly states that you'll be notified to return to work if there is any work available. Can't you read? If you haven't been notified, of course, it means there's no work for you. What do you want me to explain? You. Qin Yiping glared at her before closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. A real man doesn't argue with women. I'll go find Zhang Fan. He said this and turned to leave. Qin Yiping didn't return to his office. Instead, he made a phone call and arranged to meet Zhang Fan on the rooftop where they usually smoked together. I just want to ask you one thing. He stared directly into Zhang Fan's eyes. Am I the only one in the project team who can't return to work? Did you know about this from the beginning? Zhang Fan was taken aback. Qin Ge, you've misunderstood, he said, realizing what was happening. He chuckled bitterly and rubbed his forehead. After all these years, what do you take me for? I don't want it to be like this either. Qin Yiping turned his face away. But everyone else has gone back to work, and no one told me. So, Zhang Fan, if you were me, how would you feel? It's not that we didn't tell you, Zhang Fan explained. A while ago, the client's system crashed, and we found out it needed a patch. Someone had to do it, right? Then why wasn't I the one doing it? Can't I do what they're doing? You can. Your skills are definitely better than Dailing's. Zhang Fan said this, raising his hand to pat Qin Yiping on the shoulder, but Qin Yiping turned to the side, avoiding the gesture, making Zhang Fan feel a bit awkward. But who goes back to work is up to the company. It's not something a small project manager like me can decide. Qinge, I think you should go home and wait for a notification. Once there's work, the company will definitely arrange for you to return. Really? Qin Yiping looked at him intently, then smiled slightly. What if I want to go back to work now? Of course, I won't bother you with that, since I don't expect you to fight for me. With that, he dialed the labor inspection hotline in front of Zhang Fan. The next day, Qin Yiping received the notification to return to work. But it was not what he had expected. The company said the module he was responsible for had little work, so he only needed to come in 1 day a week. Of course, the pay was based on 1 day's work. When all was said and done, his salary was barely higher than when he was on standby. What was even harder for Qin Yiping to accept was that everyone in the project team started to distance themselves from him. It wasn't outright hostility, but sometimes when he joined a conversation, the others suddenly fell silent. More often than not, after working all morning, he would look up and find that the others had already gone out to lunch, without anyone inviting him. As for the weekly Friday dinners, card games, or weekend workouts they used to do together, Qin Yiping wasn't sure if they still went, but he knew he wasn't part of it anymore. It wasn't that it didn't hurt. Even though he had long understood that colleagues weren't friends, he never imagined that in the face of profit, human relations would be so easily discarded. Especially later, when Qin Yiping heard that every department had to optimize by cutting 20% of the staff. Such a nice way to say it, optimize. It was almost better to just be straightforward and lay off employees. In less than 2 months, Qin Yiping was starting to crack. The low income was one thing. The bigger issue was that the feeling of going to work was no different from going to a funeral. Maybe I should just resign and stop dragging this out. Seeing how down he was every day, his wife felt sorry for him. Worst case, we just focus on driving for ride-sharing. We don't need to make a fortune, just enough to pay off the mortgage. After that, we can live however we want. Her words were not wrong, but they made Qin Yiping feel incredibly bitter. In his younger days, he had been full of ambition, never imagining that he would end up here. He had worked hard, and he hadn't stopped learning or improving his skills. Let's wait and see. Qin Yiping sighed as he said this. I'll update my resume again. He had only intended to test the waters, after all. He wasn't willing to accept his situation. However, the next afternoon, Qin Yiping received a call. The caller claimed to be a headhunter, recommending a position that was a perfect match for both the industry and job content. Qin Yiping, naturally, took the opportunity to prepare seriously and attended the interview. After passing multiple rounds, they finally came to the salary discussion. He asked for the same salary as his previous job, and though he was nervous, the other party quickly agreed. I've always said, not all companies care about age. His wife was thrilled, praising him. Your technical skills are solid. Someone with a keen eye will recognize your value. Of course, with the offer in hand, Qin Yiping felt a little of his old confidence return. This damn company is nothing but traps and office politics. Don't say they don't want me. Now I don't want them anymore. The next day, Qin Yiping submitted his resignation. Given the current situation in the company, it's probably better for you to leave, Zhang Fan said, his expression somewhat awkward after hearing his words. From my perspective as a brother, I don't want to let you go either, Qin Yiping continued. But you know, besides me, you're the highest paid person in the project group. So, no need to say more, I understand. Zhang Fan waved his hand, signaling he got it. If Qin Yiping didn't leave, Zhang Fan would likely be the one to go. In the end, it's every man for himself. Who could blame him? Luckily, Qin Yiping had already secured another job. It was true what they said. Sometimes taking a step back opens up a whole new world. The two men shared a cigarette, marking the end of their years of friendship. Back at his office, Qin Yiping logged into the OA system to begin his resignation process. Typically, a company requires a 1-month notice period for resignation. But due to the cost control measures from HR and the fact that Qin Yiping didn't have much to hand over, he agreed to start work at his new company in a week. However, just as he was about to proceed, the OA system crashed. I heard it's because the server is outdated. They need to migrate everything to a new server, Zhang Fan explained. Qin Yiping had no intention of waiting. He wasn't about to waste another day working for a company that only paid him for a single day in a week. He got up and headed straight for the network administrator's office. Years ago, when the company was smaller, Qin Yiping had also served as the OA administrator, so he had no technical issues with the system. If needed, he was even willing to help out with the migration. "Having you help me is a huge relief," the network administrator said, clearly pleased. The two of them started setting up equipment and migrating data. As they worked, they chatted about Qin Yiping's new company. Tianhui? That name sounds familiar, the network administrator said, furrowing his brows. After a while, he still couldn't place it. "They're in the same industry, working on our downstream business." "It's not surprising you've heard of them," Qin Yiping replied casually. "That makes sense," the network administrator said. After verifying that the backup was restored and everything seemed fine, the two of them were about to head out for some noodles when the network administrator suddenly stopped. "Wait a second, Qin Ge," he called out. "I remember now." The network administrator lowered his voice and leaned closer to Qin Yiping, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "That Tianhui company, it might be shady. But don't say I told you, okay? I haven't found my next job yet. I still need to keep this one for now." Qin Yiping didn't wait for the elevator. He ran down the stairs, and once outside the building, he immediately dialed the headhunter's number. "Hello, Mr. Qin. How are the resignation procedures going?" the headhunter asked in his usual smooth tone. "Resignation procedures?" Qin Yiping scoffed. "You must really be hoping I finish them, huh?" The headhunter hesitated.
What do you mean by that?
"Didn't you agree to join Tianhui in a week?" "Yeah, and then they can fire me during the probation period," Qin Yiping said coldly. "They'll just say I don't meet the job requirements. At most, they'll pay me half a month's salary. And if I don't understand, they won't pay me a dime. Doesn't that sound like a great deal?" Thinking back to what the network administrator had told him about the boss sending him to help with their network setup, Qin Yiping's anger flared. "Don't play dumb with me. Tianhui and our company have the same ultimate controlling party. In fact, the legal representative of Tianhui is our boss's father-in-law. Don't tell me you didn't know that. Since the company is willing to set up this whole scheme just to save a little severance money, there's no way they'd pay your headhunter fee," he continued, his voice sharp. "So, I guess you must have some cooperation with both companies, right? As a headhunter, don't you think this is a pretty shady move?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "How about this, Mr. Qin? I can recommend another company for you," the headhunter said. "Honestly, with your background, if you lower your expectations, there's still opportunities out there." "I'll definitely have opportunities," Qin Yiping said. "After all, my skills speak for themselves. But I don't trust you." With that, he hung up. That night, Qin Yiping bought a few cans of beer and sat alone in the park drinking until late. It was only now that he truly understood. From the moment they canceled the overtime meals, to checking attendance, selling cars, and even moving feng shui items, it was all part of a bigger plan to create an atmosphere where they could cheaply lay off the people they no longer wanted. So when colleagues left the company, no one tried to stop them. Some colleagues who switched jobs ended up being laid off again within days. Even when he hadn't left voluntarily, the company grew impatient and started their second move, placing him on standby. They had even tried to pressure him with things like, "Everyone else is signed, and other people have work to do before they can return," while his own workload was deemed unnecessary. It was clear they had teamed up with a project group to launch a covert campaign against him. The more he thought about it, the more he found it ridiculous. The company was clearly treating him as a pawn, someone so insignificant that they still had to pull out all the stops, conspiracies within conspiracies. But what could he do? It seemed like his rebellious streak was back. Qin Yiping wasn't about to let them have it their way. The next day, he dressed neatly and went to work as usual, acting completely unfazed. "Are you here to submit the resignation process?" Zhang Fan asked when he bumped into Qin Yiping in the hallway. "Didn't the OA system get fixed yesterday? Why do you need to come back?" "It's fine," Qin Yiping replied casually. "After all, it's work. I've been running around for so many years. A few more years won't make a difference." Zhang Fan was taken aback. "A few more years? Didn't you say you were going to leave yesterday?" "Yeah," Qin Yiping smiled. "I was thinking about it at first, but then I figured, why bother? I've been here for over 10 years, and I've developed some feelings for the place. Besides, if I go somewhere else, it'll be harder for us to meet up for a meal or play cards. Why make it so difficult?" "What about the new company?" Zhang Fan asked, clearly surprised at the change in his attitude. "I thought you were happy with both the industry and the pay there?" "I'm happier here," Qin Yiping pointed toward the HR department. "Anyway, I got to go see Miss Lulu. I saw a live stream yesterday from a labor law expert, and he said that in my situation, I could demand the company provide better working conditions or claim forced resignation and demand compensation. I think Lulu might be a bit less experienced in these matters, so I'll go remind her." With that, Qin Yiping turned and walked away. "Hey," Zhang Fan called out from behind. "Maybe you should double-check things. You can't believe everything you hear online." "Got it." Qin Yiping didn't turn around but waved his hand behind him. Once out of Zhang Fan's sight, he couldn't help but let out a sarcastic smile. The smile lasted until he handed the screenshot to Lulu. "Qin go." Lulu was silent for a few seconds, then sighed softly. "Why are you doing this?" "The company definitely needs to optimize its staff, and your project team has already decided it's you. Even if we let you come back to work, have you thought about how others will view you? Don't you think it will be awkward?" "I didn't do anything wrong." Qin Yiping raised an eyebrow. "What's so awkward about it? In the same office, everyone has to interact. If people say you forced others out, it won't look good on you either." Lulu's tone now seemed to be genuinely considering Qin Yiping's position. "Since you found me today, why don't we do this? I'll apply to the leadership and get you 2 months' salary as severance, so we can part ways on good terms."
How about that?
"But I remember, even for a good parting, the minimum severance is 1 month's salary for every year of work," Qin Yiping said. "That's impossible." Lulu shook her head decisively. "You've seen the market. Companies that give severance pay are the good ones. So, Qin go. I advise you to take the offer while it's still good. What if I don't take it?" Qin Yiping laughed a couple of times. "Anyway, you guys haven't been idle these past few days. If you have any other tricks, go ahead and use them." "Don't say it like that. If it weren't for the company's situation, why would an HR like me be willing to do this kind of thing?" Lulu began to vent. "But the market is bad. We can't secure any contracts, and the company has no income. We can't just keep feeding so many people for nothing. Even if the company is willing to keep us, how long can it last?" At this point, she took a signed agreement for the termination of the labor contract out of her drawer. "Look, this is from another colleague. They worked here for 7 or 8 years and only got 1 month's salary. Like I said, everyone knows parting on good terms is best for everyone. Otherwise, when you go for interviews and they find out you were laid off, what will they think?" "Qin go, your career is still long. We can't just focus on this small benefit in front of us. Don't you agree?" "This isn't a small benefit." Lulu was eloquent, but Qin Yiping remained unmoved. "I have a mortgage to pay and a family to feed. I can't worry about what you're saying right now. At worst, I'll drive for a ride-hailing service. At least that money will give me some breathing room for a few months. I'm the kind of short-sighted person you're talking about." "Qin ge you." Lulu opened her mouth a little speechless and then asked, "How much do you want?" "I'll tell you up front, we can't offer N. The company really doesn't have the money." Qin Yiping asked for 8 months' salary, about 150,000 yuan. It would cover more than a year's worth of mortgage payments. It wasn't that he didn't want to go through labor arbitration, but the company could afford to drag things out, while he couldn't. However, although Qin Yiping was straightforward, he didn't like being taken advantage of. He remembered the previous incidents and held a grudge. So during the handover period, he worked overtime and wrote several patch updates, upgrading all the previous products. For this, Zhang Fan felt quite guilty and tried several times to organize a farewell gathering for Qin Yiping. But Qin Yiping refused each time. As a man in his middle years, after enduring so many grievances, he no longer felt the need to endure the awkwardness of socializing. If he couldn't eat with the people, he had no intention of eating with them in the future. After completing the handover and packing up the things he had accumulated over the years at the company into a bag, Qin Yiping quietly left. It wasn't until he was outside the door and looked back that his eyes reddened a little. Those years of youth were truly gone, never to return. He received a call from Zhang Fan 2 weeks later. At the time, Qin Yiping had just attended a few interviews and was at home waiting for offers. Qin Ge, the system crashed. The client just switched leaders and they're really upset. Could you come back and handle it? Zhang Fan asked. Me? Qin Yiping pretended to be surprised. But I already resigned. Besides, all 4 of you are there. You shouldn't need me, right? Zhang Fan was a little embarrassed. We've looked at it, and it's not a minor issue. It looks like we need to revise some code. But you wrote the core code before, and the last time you patched it, the comments didn't sync. Could you spare some time? I can't spare it. Qin Yiping grabbed a bottle of cola from his desk, took a swig, and smiled. I have a bad memory. The moment I left the company, I forgot all the work-related stuff. Besides, look, I no longer have a job. I need to find a new one. How could I be bothered with this? Zhang Fan tried to persuade him a few more times, but eventually realized Qin Yiping had really turned his back and reluctantly hung up. Even if they wanted to pursue the matter, there was no way to hold Qin Yiping accountable for the system crash. It was just a small work mistake. Later, Qin Yiping heard that the client sued the company, and they ended up losing quite a bit of money. Good for them. What goes around comes around. Qin Yiping was happy, even eating an extra 2 servings of rice that night. Of course, there was another piece of good news. Qin Yiping ended up joining a startup company. The company wasn't large, but the product and team were good. Though his salary was lowered, he received stock options. Qin Yiping wanted to make the most of his time while he could still fight and give it one more shot. Opportunities always come with risks, and nothing in this world is ever stable. As for the experience he had with the company and the so-called brothers who joined forces to set him up, Qin Yiping considered it as a lesson he had to pay for in the workplace. The company also paid the price. He didn't lose out.